A closed-door meeting just ended in Brussels. The G7 foreign ministers pressed Marco Rubio for clarity on America's Iran strategy, and he could not provide it, not a timeline, not an end state, not a definition of victory, just uncertainty. My name is Professor Jiang. I study geopolitics and predictive military analysis, and what I am about to show you is not speculation. It is the analytical breakdown of a diplomatic moment that changes the trajectory of this entire war. Because when America's closest allies cannot get a straight answer about the strategy, they begin to make decisions based on their own national interest rather than on alliance solidarity. And that is exactly what is happening right now. Stay with me. Now let me show you what actually happened in that G7 meeting and why Rubio's inability to provide clarity is more significant than any missile strike or oil price spike in the last 22 days. Here is what we know from multiple diplomatic sources. The G7 foreign ministers met in Brussels yesterday to coordinate their response to the Iran conflict. The United States was represented by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The agenda included 3 specific questions that every allied government needed answered. First, what is the end state of this military campaign? Is the objective regime change in Iran? Is it the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capability? Is it the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz? Or is it something else entirely? Second, what is the timeline for achieving that end state? Days, weeks, months. The allies need to know because their own domestic political calendars, economic planning cycles, and military readiness postures depend on understanding the duration of the conflict. Third, what is the exit strategy? How does this war end? What conditions must be met for de-escalation? What role do the allies play in the diplomatic resolution? According to sources inside the meeting, Secretary Rubio was unable to provide definitive answers to any of these 3 questions. He described the objectives in general terms. He declined to specify a timeline. He characterized the exit strategy as contingent on Iranian behavior rather than on a predefined set of conditions. Now, here is the number I promised you, the one that changes everything. Following that meeting, 3 of the G7 nations, Germany, Italy, and Canada, instructed their ambassadors in Tehran to explore back-channel diplomatic contacts with Iranian officials, not to negotiate on behalf of the United States, not to undermine the military campaign, but to establish independent communication channels that could be used if the military campaign stalls or if diplomatic off-ramps become necessary. This is not a minor diplomatic maneuver. This is a fundamental shift in alliance dynamics. When allies begin to pursue independent diplomatic channels in an active conflict, it means they no longer believe the lead nation has a coherent strategy that they can support with full confidence. Let me now show you why this matters analytically. Beyond the immediate diplomatic story, because this is where the Professor Jiang analysis adds something that straight news reporting does not. Alliances are not permanent, they are conditional. They depend on shared strategic objectives, mutual trust, and credible leadership. When any one of those 3 pillars weakens, the alliance begins to fracture, not necessarily in a dramatic public way, but in the quiet, cumulative decisions that allies make about resource allocation, intelligence sharing, diplomatic positioning, and military cooperation. The United States has been the dominant power in the G7 alliance since its formation in 1975. That dominance was not based on military strength alone. It was based on strategic clarity, on the ability to articulate a vision, to define objectives, to communicate a path forward that allies could support even when they did not agree with every tactical decision. What happened in Brussels yesterday signals that strategic clarity is no longer present, and when strategic clarity disappears, allies begin to hedge. They protect their own interests. They prepare for multiple outcomes. They reduce their exposure to risks that they did not choose. This is not disloyalty. This is rational statecraft. And it has consequences for how this war ends. Now I want to show you the historical pattern because this has happened before, and the outcome was not good for the lead nation. In 2003, in the lead up to the Iraq War, the United States sought G7 and NATO support for military action. Several allies, including Germany and France, expressed skepticism about the intelligence, the objectives, and the exit strategy. The United States proceeded anyway. The war began, and over the next 8 years, those allies gradually reduced their political, military, and financial support for the campaign. Not because they opposed the goal of removing Saddam Hussein, but because they did not believe the United States had a coherent plan for what came next. The result was not just a longer, more costly war. It was a permanent erosion of trust in American strategic leadership that took over a decade to repair. The pattern is clear. When allies perceive a lack of strategic clarity from the lead nation, they begin to act in their own national interest. That does not mean they abandon the alliance. It means they reduce their exposure to risks they did not choose. And that reduction in exposure changes the strategic calculus for everyone involved. Now I want to show you what the 3 G7 nations that are exploring back-channel contacts are actually doing, because this is the layer that no news channel is providing. Germany has instructed its ambassador in Tehran to reactivate diplomatic channels that were used during the JPO negotiations in 2015. These channels are not public. They are not for show. They are for contingency planning. If the military campaign stalls, if humanitarian conditions deteriorate, if a diplomatic off-ramp becomes possible, Germany wants to be ready to facilitate. Italy has taken a similar step, but with a different focus. Italian diplomats are exploring whether there is appetite within the Iranian government for a negotiated settlement that would preserve Iran's civilian nuclear program while imposing verifiable limits on enrichment activities. This is not a proposal. It is an exploration. But the fact that it is happening at all signals that Italy is preparing for a diplomatic outcome that may not align with the current U.S. military trajectory. Canada's approach is more humanitarian. Canadian diplomats are assessing whether there are opportunities to negotiate humanitarian corridors, prisoner exchanges, or civilian protection measures that could reduce suffering regardless of the military outcome. This is not opposition to the war. It is preparation for its consequences. Each of these diplomatic initiatives is rational from the perspective of the nation undertaking it, but collectively they signal a fragmentation of alliance strategy that was not present at the beginning of this conflict. Let me now give you the 3 specific signals to watch in the next 72 hours that will tell you whether this diplomatic fragmentation is accelerating or stabilizing. The first signal is any joint statement from the G7 foreign ministers that includes specific, actionable commitments regarding the Iran conflict. If such a statement is issued, it means the alliance is recoalescing around a shared strategy. If no such statement is issued, or if the statement is vague and non-committal, it means the fragmentation is continuing. The second signal is any announcement of high-level diplomatic travel to the region by G7 officials other than American representatives. If the UK, France, or Japan send senior diplomats to Tehran, Muscat, or Doha to engage directly with Iranian or regional officials, it means independent diplomatic initiatives are expanding. If no such travel occurs, it means the allies are still deferring to American leadership. The third signal is any change in the public rhetoric of G7 leaders regarding the Iran conflict. If leaders begin to use language that emphasizes diplomatic solutions, humanitarian concerns, or multilateral frameworks over military objectives, it means the alliance is shifting toward a different strategic posture. If the rhetoric remains focused on military pressure and Iranian compliance, it means the alliance is still aligned, at least publicly. Before I close, I want to come back to something that connects this analytical work to your personal life. I do this work every day because I believe people deserve analysis that goes deeper than the headline, that reads the letter inside the envelope rather than just describing the envelope itself. Doing that work at this level every day at age 63 requires a body and a mind that can sustain the pace. Advanced amino formula has been a genuine part of how I maintain that capacity. After 40, your body stops absorbing protein the way it did when you were younger. It converts much of it to sugar instead of using it to maintain and rebuild muscle. The result is the gradual energy decline and mental fog that most people over 40 accept. As normal aging, it is not normal aging. It is a nutritional gap. Specifically, the 8 essential amino acids your body needs but can no longer extract efficiently from the food and protein supplements you give it. Advanced Amino delivers all 8 in the ratio your cells can actually use with almost zero waste. That is why it hits differently from protein shakes and other supplements I tried before. The link is in the pinned comment and in the description below. They offer a full 90-day money-back guarantee if you do not feel different. In 2 weeks, return it. Zero risk. But I am telling you from my own experience at 63, covering these stories at full intensity every day. When your body has what it actually needs, everything else becomes easier. The G7 pressed Rubio for clarity on America's Iran strategy. He could not provide it. 3 allies are now exploring independent diplomatic channels. The alliance is beginning to fragment. The morning shows will cover this as a diplomatic footnote below missile counts and oil prices. They will not show you the historical pattern. They will not show you the strategic consequence. They will not show you what alliance fragmentation means for how this war ends. Now you have all of it. Subscribe right now if this gave you the analytical depth that the news cycle is not providing. Drop a comment below with yes or no. Do you believe the G7 alliance will remain unified on Iran strategy over the next 30 days? I read every single comment. I will see you tomorrow.